All right. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Educators podcast. I am Mr. Burdon, aka Aaron, and I am very, very excited to not only have a very esteemed doctor in the education world, but also my brother Rat from VMI, and his alter ego was New Jack from our morality play in Colonel Barragona's class. He was the MVP in that play, by the way. He decided not to pursue acting. Instead, he got into education. But, there's always the acting career to fall back on. But, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce to you Dr. Raynor Roberts. Hey, what's going on, Doc?
Hey, what's going on, BR? And please don't call me Doc. I am BR or just Ray to you.
Very good. BR Ray. It's great to have you. And it's just freaking amazing to think that a kid from old Baltimore ends up in Lexington, Virginia, military school, and then is now in Saudi Arabia with a PhD and teaching in Saudi Arabia. How did that happen?
You may know better than me. I don't know. This dumb kid from Baltimore has had a very storied life.
Yep.
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know if you were ever around me at VMI. And people would ask me, what are you going to do with an English degree?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, and then like people would always answer their own question by saying, teach, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Teach?
Yeah.
Right? And I would say, and I would always like, I'm not going to teach. I'm not going to teach. What are you talking about? I'm not going to teach. Yeah,
teach. And here we are. Same thing. English major, computer science minor. And what did I end up? Teaching profession. Look at us. But
I wouldn't change it for the world.
Same.
I wouldn't change it for the world.
How
did I get here? I really don't know. I mean, everything was supposed to be something else, and I'm here. I really don't know.
Do you think you feel a little bit of a divine pull in there, or like just things just kind of happen for a reason?
No, absolutely divine intervention. One of the things that I've learned is let go and let God.
Mm-hmm.
Just let go and let God. Every time I plan something, every time I have these grandiose plans, right?
Yep.
God is like, no. That's not what I told you to do. We got other plans for you, buddy. Come on. And so I've learned now just to go, all right, this is the way you want me to go? All right. And just roll with it. And it's much funner when I roll with it instead of being resistant to it.
It is, it reminds me of my first, when I was student, I wasn't even student teaching. I was just doing an observation. I was going for my master's, and I'm in the classroom observing a class, and the teacher says, all right, hey, how about tomorrow you teach a lesson, teach them on the plant life cycle. I'm like, oh, this is great. So I stay up all night. I type up this 4-page lesson plan, and I got Kagan structures. I got, jigsaw method. I've got all these things, and we're doing all this like small group, whole group. And it was like this golden lesson plan handed down from the gods, from Mount Olympus. I walk in, and of course she has me teach at the very end of the day, right before they pack up. I start my lesson, 2 minutes in, disaster. Just kids raising their hands, kids fussing. One kid gets a nosebleed, falls apart completely. I start panicking. I start freaking out, trying to force this lesson that's just not working. And finally, I ended up just giving them the worksheet and telling them the answers. And they leave, they go home, and then I sit with the mentor teacher, and she's just got this smirk on her face. She already knows. But she goes, all right, I have some notes for you. But before I go over these notes, I got to ask you one question. How many lessons have you taught? And I go, including this one? 1. and she starts howling, and she says, yeah, exactly. This was your first lesson. And but it was one of those things, kind of like you said, it's like you have this grand plan, and it's like, nope, This is what you're going to do.
Yeah, that's the beauty of teaching, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I'm an advocate of lesson plans. I think planning is a very important part of the method of teaching. But I'm also the person that will tell you that you plan, but expect the plan not to happen.
Yeah.
It's it's this teacher noticing. My mentor would always tell me that teachers know what to do and when to do it, and a lesson plan is doesn't you just gotta be able to go with the flow. Lesson planning is important, but knowing what to do and when to do it is more important, and that's ultimately the art of teaching, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's the art of teaching, and unfortunately, on this side of the world, they don't really understand that art yet. It's they're still trying to figure out the education, what teaching and learning is. They kind of have this Hollywood idealistic thing of kind of like this magical lesson plan comes from gods, and all this great things happen, and they don't understand that teaching is knowing what to do and when to do it. And that it's not as structured as we would like it to be. Dr. Diane Lawson Freeman, she really produces the idea of chaos theory.
Yes.
And she, some of the, I always talk and mention her quotes that she has said over the years that really touched me when it comes to teaching and learning. One is students do not learn because we teach. And she often says that teaching does not cause learning. And that's a big pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Because we're some of the most arrogant people.
Well, we have our own world, we've got we've got our own world. That's our classroom that we have all this, control. I put in quotes because it's not really, but it's there is an ego that comes with that of it. I think you're right.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is this generation of learners really are anti-teacher, right? Our generation, and you can even argue the millennials, because we taught millennials, right? Did we teach millennials? We taught millennials.
I believe so.
Yeah, we were young teachers when millennials were so young, and millennials are still you can still kind of threaten a millennial. Sit down, I'm gonna call your mother. I'm going to give you, 2 more of these, and you're not going to have pizza, right?
2 more rainy days. The phone call.
And these kids, they have iPods, and they have Roblox, and they have PlayStation, and they have all the sensory overload.
Yeah.
And you can't really threaten a kid anymore with not going on the field trip when their parents are taking them to Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing now, right? Our big vacation was going down to the national park.
Or in some cases the FTX,
Right, exactly. And these kids now really, I was thinking the other day, these probably have to be the most spoiled kids in human history. As far as people caring about what they want and what they need. If you hear conversations about from older people, from maybe our grandparents' generation, nobody cared about kids.
Right.
Nobody cared about. I'm not saying that no one cares about kids, but nobody really cared about what kids want, needed, or expect. It was like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to shut up. You're going to shut up. My parents used to tell me, "Be seen, not heard."
Yep.
And we're talking now. We have a generation of learners who they are front and center. They expect to be the center of the attention, the center of attention. They're they're the main star of the house. Everything revolves around them, and it's not their fault because we did this. And
Yeah.
sometimes I even do, sometimes I have to even think about myself on how I treat my children. And these kids, and that's a good thing. That shows that we have advanced in the human race, that we care about our kids so much, and that we don't see our kids as assets. We see them as we see them as the future. The scary thing about it is you know how our students are responding to it.
Mm-hmm.
um, People say COVID, and the kids are they're doing this because of COVID, and that because of COVID, and I think COVID should be, or what happened during COVID, how we responded to COVID rather, should be a warning sign that maybe we're not going on the right path on how we interact with our young people.
Mm-hmm.
Because COVID only put a spotlight on a problem that already existed.
I agree,
Um,
1,000%.
um, and our young people are suffering mental health issues,
Mm-hmm.
um, mainly because they're not. Our young people today are not. We're not putting them through a rites of passage,
Mm.
and so there is something to be said when you tell a child to be seen and not heard and stay in your place, and that you're not the center of attention. And in Jordan Peterson talks about children doing dangerous things safely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, how many young people now are in the Boy Scouts now, or in young ladies are in the Girl Scouts, or young ladies can be in the Boy Scouts now.
Yeah.
Um, and how much rigor, the helicopter parents, tiger
Mm.
moms. Um,
Yeah, we didn't
so
have
as
play dates. You and I, we didn't have play
no,
dates growing up. Heck,
there was no play dates. Yeah,
I'd ride my bike down the street with nothing but shorts on, no shoes, no
no
shirt.
helmet. No, I
Yep,
mean,
I'd wreck in the gravel. I'd get cut up. I was like, cool. I
you
got a
remember those
gnarly
pedals?
scab,
You
huh?
remember those pedals that
Yeah,
we had around
yeah. Those if they
drip
swung back and
traps?
hit you in the shin, good, you're done.
It was it was the guillotine and those pedals.
Yeah,
Um,
it almost want to take the guillotine because it's more humane.
exactly. You felt no pain. So as educators, I think that's where our focus really needs to be, is on making making sure our students are three things. Um, because let's face it, our young folks have access to information more than any other generation that ever
Mhm.
stepped foot in it. They can Google anything, get the answer quite quickly.
Yeah.
We had to go to the library, right? If you were fortunate enough to have a set of encyclopedias in your home, we had a set. We just didn't have B, C, E, M, Q, R.
You're an expert on the letters that you had, but if you didn't have the letter,
B, and things happened B in 1964. I can tell you.
but
But
once you got into the Q's or the
oh
M's,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh
yeah,
well,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah, 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 yeah. And so we don't need to focus as much on the acquisition of knowledge more than we have to focus on what young people are doing with that knowledge,
Mm.
how they perceive that knowledge. Uh, can they identify objective facts against opinionated subjectivity?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, critical
and
thinking.
so, and then and then don't talk about critical thinking, and then dive into that critical thinking, dive into because they can get the facts easily. They can go Bixby or Siri,
Mhm.
tell me blah 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 blah. But what can they do with it? How can they go higher up the taxonomy, right? into
Yeah.
the realm of higher order thinking, and do something with it where and I don't know what you feel about this. Let me ask you, can
Sure.
I be the host for a second?
Absolutely.
What, in your opinion, which taxonomy is more applicable? Dr. Bloom's original taxonomy or the revised version?
I think column A, column B, and I feel like the pendulum's kind of swinging the other direction a little bit too much. Where I feel like once you get into the apply or create, like like your own, you take what you've learned and create something with it, or like extend it. And what's interesting too is because there, in a lot of teacher training, there's a new book comes out, and then all of a sudden that book becomes the thing, and all it is kind of a rehashing of either Bloom's taxonomy or like just or some other it's a wheel, not a pyramid, or it's a
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Mm-hmm.
hexagon, and they just have
Right.
changed the shape.
Right.
But I feel like I feel like it's good, kind of in general. What you're saying too, we're very blessed as a nation. We're very blessed with a lot of things, technology, a better understanding of mental health, much more compassion for students. And I think instead of it just being lecture regurgitate, we're really paying attention to giving students a bit of agency and buy-in, and we're really trying to make it so get their buy-in, make it something tangible to them, that hey, this is why I'm learning this, and then this is how you can apply it, and then getting them to the point where they can take something like something that they learned and then apply it to some another project of their own,
Mm-hmm.
or apply it to life. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel it really, I think, it comes back to the purpose of education. What it should be is preparing the next generations for truly being able to function in the cruel world that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel
And
like,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah.
Well, I was
No,
just going
no,
to
no,
say,
no, no, no. That you hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the
I
head.
feel like like in the past, like when you and I grew up, I feel like it was very much like lecture regurgitate, lecture regurgitate. There was heavy structure, but the emphasis, I think, was more like it was up to us. Like we had to, here's the information, and it's you better figure that out on your own. And then we
Right,
get into the world and get our teeth kicked in, and that's when we
right,
really start going, oh wait, what's this is
right,
what the world is.
right.
Now we're I think we're not preparing kids for the world, because we're being a little bit too, we're almost letting them, the patients run the asylum a little bit, from the standpoint of where we want their buy-in so much that we're almost forgetting that, hey, we're forgetting the scaffolding, that the kids actually crave structure.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of the worst things that happened to the United States education system was good intentions, but the No Child Left Behind and the way it's been applied, although good intentions, it's actually caused a problem, because we're so focused on a standard, we're so focused on equity of outcome, or versus like, and yet we're told, every to differentiate our instruction, because every child learns differently,
Mm-hmm.
but they have to achieve the same standard, or you're not going to get money, and your schools are not going to get accredited.
Right,
I think we need to really try to focus on student growth,
right,
because Sally might come into the classroom and already, she might come into a third grade classroom and be ready for fourth grade. And so you need to challenge Sally at her level. But
right,
then Billy is a struggling reader. Maybe he's
right,
got an IEP. Maybe he's dyslexic, or maybe he's just his home life, whatever, you caused him to struggle in certain areas. You challenge him at his level. But if you're comparing Billy to Sally, Billy's going to feel inferior,
mm-hmm.
and Sally's going to have a false sense of superiority. But you got to find that challenge for
But you know where that
everybody.
comes from? You know where that comes from, Aaron? I think that comes from us. We as educators, we still believe we teach classes and not individuals.
Yes,
If
that's a
if
good
if if if
distinction.
if, if we teach individuals, then it doesn't matter what level Sally's on, because I'm going to differentiate and I'm going to personalize
Mhm.
instruction to get Sally where she needs to go to the next level. Dr. Curran Thomason, she talks about teaching up,
Yes.
right? So, you know, when we talk about teaching up, we're not talking about teaching up to entire classes. We're
Mhm.
talking about teaching up to individuals. And I think that a lot of times that's where we miss out. And I'm telling you where that comes from, assessments. Now, and if Dr. Ray was the king of education, right?
Yes.
There would be no assessments. I think assessments are unnecessary to the type of assessments that we give.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I think summative assessments do more harm than they do any good.
Mhm.
Um, I was a poor test taker, always been a poor test taker. I've learned how to take tests now
Yeah.
after 40 something years of education. But trust me, I got on that boat late. But still, look,
Yeah.
I got those letters behind or in front of my name. Why? Because and you hit it right in the nose. I got kicked in the teeth enough to realize to get myself together, and
Yeah.
the only thing saved me is because I'm part of the old school. We Gen Xers are part of the old school,
Yeah.
and so I'm used to, hey, be quiet, be seen, not heard, follow
Mhm.
the process, take this information in. And I agree with you. Our education was, listen, regurgitate, listen, regurgitate.
Mhm.
Even at VMI, it was
Yeah.
listen, regurgitate. And I
Rap
think,
Bible.
right, and I think that's the advantage that young folks have now is they are being, you have project based learning and problem based learning, and they are being able to synthesize information from perspectives, and we're dealing with ontologies and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But the problem is you have to harden the learner and prepare them for that freedom,
Yeah.
right? Because what do you do if you don't have that core structure? Imagine uh, serving in a unit, right? Going in an
Mhm.
infantry unit, and you never been to basic training,
Yeah.
people are going to get hurt, right? And you're not going to end up accomplishing your core mission. So I think where we are missing out with young folks now is that, to your point, we still have this mindset as educators that we're teaching classes
Yeah.
and not individuals. We still focus on assessments. I don't think we focus on formative assessments enough.
I agree.
We put the cart before the horse. We're thinking about they got to do well on the MSAs. They got to do well on this assessment. They got to
Mhm.
do when we should be thinking about the formative assessment,
Mhm.
which goes back to what we talked about when we started the conversation of teachers know what to do and when to do it. And what informs that? Well, the formative assessment
Mhm.
forms that.
Yeah.
Um, and the formative assessment helps create the learner profile that the teacher uses to personalize instruction. And I
Absolutely.
think I think that's where most educators they drop the ball. Again, going back to Kerwin Thomason, she says in order to
Okay.
differentiate, students must be interested, they must be ready, and you must consider the learner profile, right?
Mhm.
So number one, a lot of times we're teaching students things that they're not interested in. Number two, they're not ready because the assumption that they're in the third grade or they're in the fifth grade or in the ninth grade, that doesn't mean they're ready.
Mhm.
And number two, have we truly looked at their learner profile? Have we sat down and got to know our students? Let me ask you, maybe you guys do this. I haven't
Yeah.
taught in an American classroom for over a decade now. The first week of school, what do you do?
should be the first month actually, but
Mhm.
the first week of school, and there I got to put a caveat because there's what the curriculum wants you to do,
Right.
which is not only completely unreasonable, but the pacing is insane.
Right.
It's like you're expected to have to teach
Right.
fractions in like 2 weeks, and you're like,
Right.
no, that's
Right.
good ongoing.
Right.
But what it should be, and what a lot of us do, and with there's a lot less flexibility in our education system, but rogue teachers that have experience, we know when we shut our door, we're going to teach how we want. Maybe the administrator might pop in, but we're going to make sure we do what's best for the kids. But I love Carolyn Ann Tomlinson because, in fact, I don't want to put a negative spin on the what I learned getting the master's in education, because there was a lot of stuff I picked up that I was able to apply, but it wasn't but that golden lesson plan that was a disaster was a great learning moment.
Mhm.
But Carolyn Ann Tomlinson, what really stuck with me was exactly what you're saying. And like, the first thing you got to do is get to know your students, get to know how they learn, what they like, what makes them tick. And that's how you truly make the learning appealing to them and buy-in. I would often I'd have little mini assessments, little formative assessments, like with questions in them, like story problems. But I would go in and I would change the story problems to match. I would put the names of my students in the story problem.
Mhm.
Like, let's say that Nika just got a new cat, and I would go in and change the story problem to somehow reflect Nika and her new cat, or Billy's skateboard, or stuff that's they talk to, and then like they get excited about the story problem. Plus, they also have kind of a more tangible
Right.
understanding of it. I
Right.
think the best thing a teacher can do is spend that entire, because I feel like September, that first month, basically dictates how the entire year is going to go for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would rather spend the entire month just, obviously building routine, building structure, building, getting the groups going. But main thing is getting to know the students and letting them get to know you, and letting them know that you're here for them, that you're not just some talking head that they got to sit through, because you don't know what teacher they had before. They may have had an awesome teacher before.
Right.
They may have had a talking head. They may have had a
Right.
mean teacher that probably should have been gone by now.
Right.
And their perspective on school is going to depend on how you make it. If you can make school like an excited place to come,
Right.
then by the time you get to October and when you start really rolling out all the stuff, they're taking it. You can't feed a closed mouth, but if they're already liking the atmosphere of your learning restaurant, they're going to eat what you're selling. All right, we're going to take a quick break from solving all of the world's problems to tell you about a good friend of mine and a service she's offering. Are you tired of feeling like your dream financial future is out of reach? Are you struggling with overwhelming debt, trying to pay off your home early, or simply wanting to give more? Well, my good friend Vanessa Rudder Jackson is here to help. An educator and military veteran, Vanessa is here to guide you through the confusion and make your dream financial future a reality. With her certified financial coaching services, she'll help you create a personalized plan that sets you up to win with money. As an educator and a mother of two, Vanessa understands the challenges of scraping by and stretching paychecks. She's been there, and she knows how to navigate the financial landscape to help you thrive. Don't let financial stress hold you back any longer. Take the first step towards financial freedom today with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching. Reach out to Vanessa today for a free 45-minute consultation at vaRudder34@gmail.com, or go to tinyurl.com/RJMoneyCoach. That's vaRudder34@gmail.com or tinyurl.com/RJMoneyCoach. Remember, it's never too late to take control of your finances and achieve your dreams. Start your journey to financial freedom with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching today. All right, now let's get back to solving the world's problem with the most charming, post on the interwebs.
Because at the end of the day, it's about relationships, right?
Yes.
Our job is to build relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, I'm not saying that we need to be, I'll tell you the other way. We shouldn't be in the business of being students. I say this hesitantly because you do want to be students' friends,
Yeah.
but not having an inappropriate relationship with students, right? So there's a lot of teachers that I see take it the other way. So they're too friendly with students.
They compromise their authority.
They compromise their authority, and then what happens is that teacher's room becomes the hangout room, and nothing really gets learned, right?
Yeah.
So that's that going back to that. What my mentor have always told me: good teachers know when to do and what to do it, and when to do it. And so it's that crazy line that nobody can quite tell you where it is.
Yeah.
No one can quite tell you. You have to learn for yourself. That goes back to your first lesson plan. Like you had to learn where those lines were.
I learned it too.
Right. Absolutely. And and the crazy thing about it is it could be 4, 5, 6 years before you figure out where those lines are.
Yeah.
And
you're constantly learning that too, I think. Because you're constantly getting new students.
Yep.
Like just when, like I always remember.
There you go. Boom.
Yeah. Yep. Like just when I get this group, I'm like, oh, I know how to deal with all these personalities. The next year you're going to get 25 new personalities that you've never dealt with before.
Wow. Donald Freeman talks about this in Action Research. Yeah. In Action Research, Donald Freeman talks about this. You don't listen. When somebody, people say, I always get here as a consultant. People are saying, well, Mr. Ray, we're looking for good teachers. And I was like, what is a good teacher?
Yeah. Define that for me. Yeah.
Because the reality is a teacher cannot proclaim that they're good.
Yeah, based on what data? Yeah,
right. Like because you don't know the next set of class students who come in.
Well, like if you're basing that, like if you define a good teacher as they got this percentage of students passing the standardized test, that doesn't necessarily define a good teacher.
No,
that defines a good trainer for passing tests. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. But not
Aaron, my first 2 years teaching at Baltimore City schools, this is when they still had the Merlin functional writing test, the Merlin functional reading test. I don't know if in Virginia if you had a test like that, but this is before what we have now. It was the Merlin functional writing, Merlin functional reading, Merlin functional math. And my first 2 years, I was the highest. I had the highest percentage out of every high school teacher in Baltimore, Maryland. But I sucked as a teacher. I look back on those days and said, "What? Like I'm ashamed." Yeah. But I had these great test scores. And everybody was Ray and Ray. And I sucked.
Yeah.
I look back on those days and I cringe. I was like,
you feel like you want to call your students that you taught and apologize.
Every last one of them and say, look, I'm sorry. Can I send you a gift card? Yeah. I don't know what to do. But I sucked. But I had high assessment scores. So that means nothing. The only people who understand that interaction is you and your students. Because they're the ones that's going to see you 30, 40 years from now and walk up to you and go, hey, man, that was amazing. I still think about some of the things you said to me, right? Or they can just walk by you and say, I think I noticed that kid. And just walks by you like you're the plague. Right? Yeah. I remember seeing one teacher, one high school teacher, and me and this teacher had a love-hate relationship. He's my teacher he was a good teacher.
Mhm.
I admit he was a good teacher in that he had all the right moves, right? He knew his
Mhm.
stuff, but he didn't care about us. It was obvious that he thought less of us. That I almost felt, even looking back on it now, it was like he was the great white hope coming to save these inner city kids,
Mhm.
and that's how he presented it. I don't care if you're the great white hope coming to save the inner city kids. I want that, but don't present it that way.
Yeah.
And all, excuse me.
Okay.
And sometimes in my back in those days where I was very arrogant, I used to call them out on it. I was
Yeah.
I was that kid, that butthole kid that would call them out on it, and we would riff a lot. And then now thinking back now, when he would send me down to the unit principal, because sometimes those
Those
conversations, I
conversations
never,
get
they never, I was never disrespectful, never, but sometimes those conversations were quite heated.
intense.
And maybe I was wrong because I was stepping out of bounds as a learner, but I never got suspended or I never got reprimanded by the assistant principal.
Hmm.
And now I understand why, because the assistant principal saw that in him also,
Mhm.
right? And I learned that later because I went to work in this same school district, and I had conversations with my teachers that became my colleagues, which was awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome because now they had a special interest in me, and part of the reason why I'm still doing the job now. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, students know,
Yes.
right? They know where your heart is. You could be a great teacher, come from Teach for America, Harvard, this, that, third, know all the jigsaw and all the, all those, know all the
Yeah.
strategies. But students know, they know. I say from middle school, you can jip the elementary kids, but from middle school up, they know.
I would even contend elementary at least
Maybe
third grade.
nowadays. Yeah,
Third
nowadays.
grade, I
Yeah.
mean, kids know. Kids know. They can sense. They may not consciously know, but they can sense when
Mhm.
you're not confident in what you're doing. They can sense when there's something going on. And like I remember, I started incorporating Minecraft into the classroom. They had this Minecraft Education Edition, and because the kids were really into Minecraft, and I became a student of it, and I actually got into it too. I started learning all these cool things as a teacher. We would build the virtual pyramids of Egypt. We built a working aqueduct in the
Mhm.
game and all that. And I was really into it, so I understood like what when they would say like what a creeper is, or they would use
Mhm.
the terms. And another teacher saw that, and I tried to kind of share with other teachers what Minecraft was, and there was a lot of pushback, and
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of pushback with technology anyways at the
Mhm.
time. But I
Mhm.
remember one other teacher, she made a bulletin board, and she was using Minecraft for the bulletin board, but she really didn't understand what it was.
Mhm.
And so when she would put like Minecraft is the name of the game, but there's no character in it called Minecraft. But she had a sign that says Minecraft does his homework. And
Right.
and it was tragic. And I talked to her about it, but as soon as she put that up and the kids see that, she's killing her credibility. She's having the
Right.
opposite effect
Right.
of what she was
Absolutely.
trying to do. She was trying, and
Absolutely.
good intentions, she was
Right.
trying to get the kids excited, but they actually immediately the kids, she's lost all credibility because they're like,
Right.
oh, you're just using Minecraft. You have no idea
Right.
what we
Right. You don't know what's going on.
exactly.
Right. Yeah, I get it. And being authentic is important.
Hmm.
Um, and because for our learners, you know, especially educators now, and this is why, there's God. So here's the rank order, right? There's God, right, and then
Hmm.
include the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's
Hmm.
all in there. Boom, right?
Hmm.
Then you have parents, right? Right.
Hmm.
Then you have teachers, right?
Not,
And
yeah, I wish it was like that.
but listen, in my opinion, that's what it is.
Yes.
God, parents, teachers. and and the issue is that's really the case now, because our learners are, they have to deal with issues that mankind has never ever had to deal with before,
Yep.
and it's going to be front and center for them. They have to deal with uh, with realities that we
Mhm.
never faced before. I mean, do you understand that the United States government is pretty much saying that there's aliens, that
Yeah.
there's life? They're pretty much saying they're slowly but surely telling us that there's intelligent life form out there. These next group of young folk, they're the ones that have to deal with that new reality.
I think we
And
matriculated with a couple aliens, to be honest.
yeah,
That's another conversation.
yeah, that's another conversation. But they have to deal with social issues. They have to deal with a level of diversity
Hmm.
that the human race has never considered at any point in time until this millennium, this century. I mean, they have to deal with
Yep.
religious diversity, you know, political diversity, economic diversity, uh, regional diversity. The immigration issue that the world is facing is not just the United States.
Hmm.
The entire world is facing. It's going to put front and center social challenges that we
Hmm.
never faced before in human history.
No.
That we never faced before, because most societies, they attempt to be inclusive. But at what point is inclusivity dangerous?
Yeah. I
Right?
mean, just
Too
it's
too much of anything. Too much of anything. Where, because eventually you're going to get to the point where you're inclusive to the point where you start wiping things out. It's like introducing the Asian carp to the Florida Everglades,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
It's wiping, introducing boa constrictors to
To the
Florida. It's
ecosystem.
wiping uh, iguanas. Is wiping. I mean, to the point where we have to hire people to shoot. Like Florida governor is asking people to shoot iguanas,
Yeah.
right? Because they're wiping out the native Florida ecosystem,
Hmm.
right? And basically, that's what's the same thing's going to happen to what we know as this beautiful thing called nationality, this beautiful thing called race, this beautiful thing called culture, right? Sometimes we say, we talk about culture and it's such a bad thing. Um, so our learners have to deal with the point in which we want to be inclusive, we want to be humanitarians, we want to be global citizens, right? We want to show people, right, courtesy, that people have natural God-given rights.
Hmm.
But also, when do we make sure that we protect what it means to be instinctively human, right?
That's
We
huge.
have never had to deal with that. We have never
Well,
had to deal with that, because when we dealt with
mhm.
that ethically, right, it was kind of like, this is the ethics of it, right? And we could talk kind of for play like it was fiction. Now it's the real deal. Now these issues of ethics, they're not philosophical questions anymore.
Mm-mm.
They're issue of reality,
Yeah.
right? And don't go into the other things that I don't want to talk about here that are front and center now. Um, so we have this responsibility now to and it's difficult because we can't
Hmm.
inject our own personal bias, right? Because then
Yeah.
no, then now we're not being teachers at that point, right?
Right.
So we got to be very careful not to inject our personal bias. However, make sure that students are on a path that is reasonable, where they have agency and they can make decisions. And it's a tough job for us.
Very
because
tough.
if we fail, we're in big trouble.
And that's where I feel like, focus, because I do see it, and we're human, because we can't help but have bias. But when we fight, like, there's a difference between telling somebody that I don't know, just the South should have won the war, or that so and so Abraham Lincoln was a terrible president, or Barack Obama was a terrible president. That's someone putting their own personal bias on it. Right. But if you're teaching, like scientific investigation, if you approach learning the scientific method or scientific investigation to all learning, I feel like that's a safer approach, because one of the biggest things I feel like we need our kids to learn, our future generations, is that if you have a hypothesis about something and you check it, or it gets checked and you get new data, you need to be able to use that data to conclude that your hypothesis is wrong, and know that the hypothesis being wrong doesn't mean you're wrong. Right. And I think a lot of times we get emotionally attached. In some cases, it becomes part of our identity to have a hypothesis. Right. And the hypothesis, in some cases, it might be just something someone heard somebody say, and they're, I'm going to believe that. But in a lot of cases, it's something that people really believe in their heart and heartfelt, but they fail to go that extra mile to be able to change their mind based on new evidence. And I think that's where we get a lot of conflict now.
Let me put it in perspective for you.
Okay.
So as you know, I just recently went to my graduation for my doctorate.
And congratulations.
Thank you. But here's what I noticed during that ceremony. There was 2 rows of PhDs. 2 rows. Maybe 20 people in each row. Let's say 40 people.
40 people. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was about 50 rows of EDDs. Okay. And anybody listening, I believe EDDs are very important. I'm not saying anything bad about EDDs. I'm not saying EDDs are needed in the educational setting. Okay. But so I qualified that. I like EDDs. Right? Okay. But it's a little problematic to me that you had 2 rows of people who did quantitative research or applied research, right?
Real quick, maybe define EDD for.
All right. So basically, in education, you have, or in doctorates, when it comes to education, you can take 2 routes. You can be an EDD, that means you're a doctor of education, okay? Mm-hmm. Or you could be a PhD like me, which is a philosopher, the doctor of philosophy in education. Mm-hmm. In an EDD, you don't do a dissertation. You do something called a capstone, which is difficult. It's not easy. It's difficult, but it's more of application, applying your real life experience to a project, okay? And typically, that capstone is qualitative in nature, which is making my point.
Okay? Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. Which, again, that's fine, right? And that capstone is fine. Mm-hmm. But in the School of Education, we had about 50 rows of EDDs, 2 rows of PhDs. That's problematic. Because the PhDs, you had only 2 rows of PhDs who did quantitative research, dealing with numbers, dealing with
data.
Mind you, that in education you can't do with real research. We do what we call quasi research because it's not ethical to conduct research.
All right, you kids are going to go in this classroom. You're the control group.
Right. Yeah. Yes, that's not ethical. But so we do. So in education, we do something called quasi experiments, right? Mm-hmm. And So, but we still deal with numbers, right? We deal with
Yeah.
hard numbers. And one of the things that, as because hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be on a chair for future doctors for their dissertation. One of the things that and I talked about this a lot in my dissertation, is that and my mentor instilled this in me, that when you do research, you cannot beg, you cannot suggest the answer in the research question, cannot suggest the final result.
Yeah.
Okay. And you see that a lot in qualitative research. In their research question or in their introduction, they're already giving you the answer to the research when you haven't conducted the research yet.
Yep.
That's not scientific.
Not at all.
So you willing the result of your research. You can't will the result of your research.
It begs confirmation bias, because then you're only looking for the data that supports
you're only going to start looking for the data, right? And you cannot submit to your own data. And that's the scary thing about having 50 rows of qualitative guys who, in my opinion, I know qualitative research understand that hard data, and personalizes, but in the climate, in the intellectual and political and social climate that we're in now, we're getting a lot of PhDs and a master's degree guys who, they're doing a master thesis and a PhDs who already have the answer before they even started their research.
Yeah.
And that's scary. That's extremely scary, because some of these guys are getting education degrees in instruction, curriculum and instruction. Right? That's scary.
And they're shaping the future of education.
And they're shaping because they're going to write curriculum
based off
where students are not considering objective realities and already jumping to conclusions. That's extremely scary.
Very scary.
You only have 2 rows of people who are saying, let's look at the data first. This is what the data says, and let's move towards the data. Because a big part of teaching and learning is making data-driven decisions, right?
Yes, it should be. Yeah.
So if a big part of teaching and learning is making data-driven decisions, and we have people who already know the answer before they looked at the data, this is problematic.
Well,
and so it's very problematic, extremely problematic, especially and when I was taking qualitative research class, and then I looked at the textbook, and there was as they were explaining what qualitative research was, the authors say that the main purpose, and to me, I don't know about you, but to me, this is scary. And I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting directly, but the author said that the main role of qualitative research is to break down existing power structures. This is in the textbook.
Really?
In the textbook. I'll send it to you later on.
Yeah.
Because this is in the textbook. And mind you, I went to a conservative university, right?
Yeah.
I went to a relatively conservative university. And in their textbook, the authors explain that the definition or the purpose behind qualitative research is to break down existing power structures. And then it goes into all the perspectives you can do that: feminism, disabilities, critical race theory, all those things. And you go,
yeesh.
So if I'm a feminist doing my PhD studies on women and how women don't have equity at Ivy League universities, right? And I'm not looking at it from a quantitative perspective. I'm gaining interviews. I'm doing interviews. And then based on my interviews, I'm making these
generalizations
that may not match the quantitative data.
Yep.
Or I looked at the quantitative data and I said, well, this is just white men numbers.
Lying about,
This is some white guy made this number.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw out these numbers that don't support my.
But I like these numbers right here. Right, that's scary because in quantitative research we have to deal with the numbers and we have to accept what it is.
I like what you said too about submitting to your data too, because I think this is a huge problem in a lot of campuses, a lot of college campuses, especially not just with the education system, but like with all degrees. It's shifting towards that having the hypothesis is the conclusion that you're going to build you form your data towards, rather than here's your hypothesis, steel man it or destroy me, and being submitting to your data so that you, when you look at, you can get to a point where, okay, my hypothesis was incorrect. And like when I remember distinctly, this was we're teaching magnets, and I had the kids write a hypothesis, and one of the students came up with a testing question was, does the color of the magnet determine how it holds the other objects? And everybody thought that, people were thinking that was silly, because what does it have to do with magnetism? And I said, no, keep that, because that's good, because this is going to be an example of a question that the data is going to show that it's incorrect. And but the most important thing was for the students to realize, yeah, if your hypothesis is incorrect, you can change. But what's scary is we're now kind of going, we're almost like, it's really like a intellectual echo chamber that we're creating. One of my favorite quotes was from Chris Rock, when he's talking about political parties. He's talking about political philosophies. He says, anybody that makes up their mind before they hear an issue is an idiot. Right. And I think that's what happens in a lot of cases, is where you declare a political party, or you come out as something, or you declare yourself as something. You now have in society, it's like you have to follow this checklist of beliefs. Well, like you and I both know, and most rational people realize, the world is not that simple. Yeah. And it's not, and there's a lot more nuance to pretty much every issue there. And to just make up your mind before you really look at data and say, hey, I'm this, this, and this, you're already there. That confirmation bias is already there.
But I'm gonna tell you something more powerful, Aaron.
Okay.
Being on this side of the world,
yeah,
as an American, we don't realize how we, the United States of America, we're the standard for the rest of the world. And I don't say that arrogantly. Okay. I'm abroad. I've been abroad for 13 years. And people look at what we say as what they should believe.
Yeah.
Or they say, well, these guys are there. What do I need to do to get that? And that's quite scary, by the way. And I say, hold on a second. Hey, I'm glad that you like to listen to CNN and Fox and all these things. But what do you, when I come into a room, right? And let's say I'm talking to a bunch of Saudi guys, older guys.
Yeah.
Older Saudi guys love talking politics. They love talking politics.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm like, guys, look, I kind of just want to hang out.
Yeah.
They want to talk politics. And, Biden and Trump and whatever, because they want it, right? And they want to hear what I have to say, because it's like, okay, the American believes this.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's scary, because our perspective on things, whether people want to admit it or not, has value to the rest of the world. So, To whom much is given, much is required.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it again. To whom much is given, much is required. We have to be very careful out there because we're not only dictating US policy, we're dictating world policy because people look at us.
We're leading by example. What we just got to make sure that example
People look
is.
at us
Yeah.
and say, okay, that's what we should be doing. That's the political mindset. That guy is good. That guy is bad. That's the definition of righteousness. That's the definition of evil. To whom much is given, much is required. There's a reason why in the south of that border, it's not just South Americans they're finding at the south of that border. They're finding people from all over the world
Mm-hmm.
trying to come. So there's other places to come. They can come to Saudi, and Saudi has its immigration issues, but Saudi is also addressing it quite well. They can go to UK, and they go to there's other great destinations. But the number one destination, and I say this, and I don't say this arrogantly, the number one destination is the United States of America. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have done a lot of things well for a long time. And people like that. People like the security that we offer. They like the idealism that we bring to on the world stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to make sure that as educators that we are continuing that great history. And where did it come from? Because it's not a recent thing. It's actually been in the making ever since the end of World War II
Mm-hmm.
with English language learning, right?
Yeah.
The Brits and the Americans in the State Department, there's something called education, English. There's a person in each region responsible for English language acquisition in the United States State Department. Okay, the British has their they call them. Why am I having a brain cramp? They're called the British Council.
British
They
Council.
kind of
Okay.
the British Council
Mm-hmm.
is kind of responsible for making sure that people learn English, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you heard of things like TESOL and CELTA,
So yeah.
CELTA and TESOL and Delta and TOEIC and all these things. And all of these were just packages and products, post-war products. Once you win the war, you got to give people Coca-Cola. You got to go and shake babies and
Yeah.
you got to keep babies. So what we did, and the Brits did also, was that we sent our young people right out of college, so in some cases right out of high school,
Mm-hmm.
who didn't want to talk war, was wanted to be a good representative for the United States, to teach people in villages, to teach people in third world countries the English language. But it wasn't about teaching them the English language. It was really about this presentation, offering the people that, hey, look, we want to make sure that it's like the first step to globalization, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this has been embedded since the 40s,
Yeah.
50s. It really ramped up in the 60s and 70s, right? And so we have done a good job in kind of putting front and center this Western mindset that was that believed in God, that wasn't too far off of. People will be surprised to believe that there's not a great difference in Saudi Arabia and America culturally. Seems like it because that's the
Yeah.
way the media present it. But when you get on the ground in person, when I first got here in 2011, Riyadh reminded me of 1980s USA.
Oh wow.
Remember when stores were closed on Sundays?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yep.
When stores were closed on Sundays.
Now it's just Chick-fil-A.
The grocery store maybe stayed open until noon.
There were curfews.
Remember when women wore in church and even on the street? I never saw my mother in long pants. Never saw my mother in pants. Never. I never saw my mother in shorts. I always saw my mother in a dress.
Mm-hmm.
She was always in a dress. Always. Go to church, women wore dresses. Women, it was not, you didn't wear anything tight or revealing. And, there was certain protocols and procedures. We treated each other a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So not that far from what Saudi culture is today. And mind you, Saudi culture is moving very closely to be Western. Or Western,
Yeah.
There's sometimes when I'm here and I think I'm in the States. Right? You got KFC. I mean, the strip mall, it looks like a strip mall. You got a KFC, you got a McDonald's, you got a Piazza, you got a this, you got a, it's like this is States. They just opened a Wendy's, right?
Oh wow!
So
the Dave's double.
But the mindset is that we in the West kind of have it together. So we have to make sure that if we want to maintain, it's not about bombs anymore.
Mm-mm.
It's not about military presence anymore, because I think we have done a good job where people really get what the West is about, right? Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the everyday. I'm not talking about politicians and I'm talking about the everyday people on the ground.
Joe and Jane, right?
They get it, right? Mm-hmm. They get it, right? I've never been, and I've been all over the world. I've never felt unwelcome. You could earn. I don't know how much you travel, but I know you could be sitting in the airport, standing in line, and you just so happen to have your passport out because you're in line because you have your passport, right? And it's a long line. Oh, they say queue, right?
Queue,
queue, right?
Queue up.
To me, that's still weird. Like, the queue, it's a line, right?
Yeah.
And somebody will walk into you, and I'm talking about not just in the Middle East, not just in Asia, but many places in the world will walk up to you and go, "Why are you standing in line?
You're American, yeah.
And you're American. What do you mean? Why I'm standing in line? I'm trying to get check into my flight. No. You put you right in front of the line."
Catch full episodes of the Educators podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Real educators with the real issues in education. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, take care of yourself. Jeans passes for anyone who likes, shares, and comments on this video. Have a great week.